we should be looking at other administrative savings that can be made. Let's examine. Let's examine. All I'm saying is let's
only
examine
about
it.
3% of the staff is central administration. When we talk about non-teaching staff, as Arlene knows, we're talking about student aides who are in the classroom. We're talking about librarians, diagnosticians, nurses. We're talking about bus drivers and cafeteria workers, all of which are required to make public education work. We do not spend in the middle in the country. We spend at the bottom per student in the country. And the reason that we have increased spending over the last decade is not only because of higher cost and rapid enrollment growth, but because we have spent the last decade and a half trying to bring the bottom of our system up to the top. Those are the equity dollars, where we've been trying to get the schools at the bottom funded as well as the schools at the top, which are still not well funded. So, you know, let me just toss out a statistic that kind of blows my mind every time I think about it, Robert. In the last decade, for the entire United States, over half of the growth in child population was in Texas. For the entire country, we accounted for over half of the growth. We are really responsible for educating the country's workforce, for producing the country's entrepreneurs and innovators, and we can't do that with our antiquated tax system and with the refusal to use all available revenue. We've got $6 billion more available in the rainy day fund, and folks really need to get engaged on this issue. Otherwise, extreme views about the budget are going to prevail.
I'm very glad that Mr. McCown brought up the fact that we have so many students, because it's the fact that their parents are choosing to live in Texas that we have about 80,000 new students every year. And that's because we focus our efforts on providing jobs. You know, these other states like California and New York that have these extravagant social services and spend far more in New York on education than we do, have also lost the ability to provide jobs for their people. So from March of 2010 to March of 2011, Texas created more jobs than any of the other 4 most populous states. It's jobs that are bringing people to Texas in the droves.
Yeah, I mean, this whole deal about jobs is such a false canard that's really confusing people. Texas has among the highest proportion of low-wage jobs in the entire country. Our folks don't make money. We have lots of low-wage jobs because we're not investing in education and in Tier 1 universities and the things we need to do to create a really vibrant economy. And the jobs we have created, in large part, are due to oil and gas and other extraction. You have to distinguish between the advantages God gave your state and the advantages your own public policies have created. And Arlene wants to take credit for what God's done and keep us with public policies that are actually hindering our economy.
Well, as a matter of fact, if it were social services that brought people to a state, and California has a wonderful climate and has the size and the natural resources that you find in Texas, but the social services are far, far higher. The people who are in those low-income jobs, wouldn't you think they'd stay in California instead of coming to Texas? Because they prefer a job to social services. And Texas, because we have been a low-tax state, we have been able to keep our job creation high, and that's why people are coming to Texas, and that is indeed something that we should brag about.
Taxes are higher out in California.
Taxes are, and that is, again, a terrible canard, because we're not talking about being a California or a New York. We are so far below just being average that it's astounding how far we are off on the average. Texas has a lot of land and has cheap housing prices and has oil and gas and has a lot of low-wage jobs. That is not a ticket to the future. A ticket to the future is to have a strong public education system. Folks aren't going to come to Texas if we have really decimated our public education system, and we're not going to create the kinds of innovators and entrepreneurs that we want if we devastate our higher education system.
Let me get back to the Senate budget issue. Senator Steve Ogden, the chairman of the Budget Committee there, has cited outside groups as wasting time.
That would be me and Arlen.
Okay, letters to senators urging them not to support the budget from your group, and commercials that are running, and you've got some new ones coming out with Phil Graham. How do you respond to that?
This is an age of transparency. This is an age of voter involvement. The people of our state, as well as across the nation, have re-engaged with their government, and we are reflecting both the Center for Public Policy Priorities and Texas Public Policy Foundation. We're reflecting what the people want, and that is to be engaged in the government.
Well, I mean, I think Arlene's right. It's a new world with the rapid information and with the ability to really see what's going on a real-time basis, and it's changed the nature of politics. It's changed the nature of governance, and that's why, frankly, Texans need to get engaged, because everybody's down at the Capitol trying to make it happen their way, and if you're not there, it isn't going to happen your way.
Some are saying that procedural maneuver on Wednesday was caused by pressure being put, especially on the Democrats, to not support the budget.
No, there was pressure both ways. There was pressure on progressives not to support the budget because it was far too thin, and there was pressure, frankly, a lot more pressure on the Republican members not to support the budget because it used a modest amount, roughly a third, of the rainy day fund. And so it was those combined pressures that resulted in the inability to reach the 2/3.